I know that some other people will join us as we go. So welcome to the June meeting of our Equity Advisory Committee. And I want to acknowledge that COVID-19 is causing us to alter our usual procedures. So we've invited residents of the region to participate in this meeting virtually. As we know, Governor Walz has declared a peacetime emergency in response to COVID-19, and the Met Council has determined it is not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person committee meeting for reasons stated in the Governor's emergency executive order. Accordingly, Met Council members and our committee members will participate in this meeting by phone or other electronic means, and will be conducted under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021. I have a few quick reminders about guidelines for WebEx and the virtual meeting process before we get started. So the first is please remain muted unless speaking. And then if you're on your phone and your computer, which I know some works best for some of you, just unmute one device when you're speaking so we don't get that squeaky feedback. And because we can't see everybody well, or you might start speaking but not be one of the squares showing on everybody's screens, please announce your name before you're speaking. We will have a couple items to do a roll call vote, and we'll to do a vote on today, and we'll do a roll call vote so we make sure we get everybody's votes. And please communicate with each other by speaking. Use the chat function only to address technical difficulties such as you can't hear or be heard, or you could let us know that you have a question, but don't put your question in the chat to avoid having a side conversation in the chat that then doesn't make it into our minutes. One thing that works for me well is if you raise your hand to speak. So if I'm calling on people, I know that you want to speak. And you do that for me on my screen, although different screens might look a little different. I have 3 dots at the bottom of my screen, and when I click on them, there's an option to raise my hand. So that's how it works on my screen. Let's see, what else should I tell you about as we move into this? This meeting is going to be recorded and will be made available online. Councilmember Gonzalez, the co-chair, Councilmember Gonzalez, is not able to join us this evening. So Councilmember Johnson is going to assist us in the agenda, and in particular, she's going to lead some of the updates from the work groups at the Met Council a little later. So, Arena, do we have a quorum or not yet?
Thank you, co-chair. We are so close. We are at 9.
At 9. Okay. What I'll do is I'm going to leave the items that require us to have a quorum, the approval of minutes and approval of the agenda until later in the meeting. But you should all have received a draft agenda that we can approve later, and we'll work from that. And if people have any concerns with it, we'll give you a chance to raise those too. So Rena, just let me know when we do have a quorum, but I'll plan to keep that part till the end.
I will indeed. Thank you.
Sure. All right, so we're going to go right into the part that Councilmember Johnson is going to lead with a few updates from the various standing committees.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate it. Again, just wanting to step in and appreciate, the opportunity to support Councilmember Gonzalez as he's not able to be with us here today. He would normally cover management and transportation, but I do see that we've got Councilmember Phil Sterner with us here today, who can cover environment and transportation. So, Councilmember Sterner, can I kick it off to you and just give us a few updates from those committees?
I mean, I can do some. I'm not prepared or anything, so it's going to go off by the last 2 meetings, but off the top of my head. So I apologize, but I'll give you what I have, and hopefully that will be still valuable with it. So let me start with the Environment Committee. We've been taking bids on things, and we're really making sure we have our scores are high as far as our equity scores are. And recently we sent back some bids because they were quite a bit higher. And then we recently got some bids back again where we approved some things, like some of our what we call that. God, let me just. It would be like the smell, the odor control. So that would be one of the bids that we worked on. We have a new vendor with odor control coming in. We're looking for some local equity bids, and we're able to get that covered. And that's pretty much going on our environment committee. It's really a kind of a diverse committee or division that we have, and I'm proud to serve in that with it. On transportation, we had a really full agenda just last night. We went to about 6:30, and some of the things coming in is the orange line is pretty well coming through. So they did some surveying of some of the areas where we could serve BIPOC communities and low-income communities, where it was going, what people were looking at, and where we would improve bus service to employment and other things. And it looked like really positive. We had like over 600 surveys that were looking and we're given some feedback. And the orange line, just for ones that aren't as familiar, it's going from downtown, stops all the way through Burnsville in the heart of the city is where it stops. And it goes through our Minnesota Valley Transit Authority as an opt-out carrier. It goes to that area, and it goes with Minnesota Valley and Metropolitan Transport coming south. So it's going to open up later this year. So that was one thing they looked at. They also were looking at the Gold Line, which comes from Woodbury, looking at some stops with that, and that's kind of ready to go. And then the Southwest had the light rail had some issues with. We had to pay money for some storage for some of the contractors, so that came up. They were some of the vendors didn't cover some of the areas, so we had to pick up some of the heavy equipment where that's stored and such. And then I think they're also looking at the serving on the TAC committee, techno advisory, where we have some of our deaf and blind members and other disabilities, but they were looking at getting more uniform on that. So there's a study with that going. Like, so some of the discussion is bringing the same kind of sound system, because some of our blind members, when they go to St. Paul, it's got kind of like a rat-a-tat-tat sound, and it doesn't really say, well, if you go to Minneapolis side on things, it'll tell what street you're crossing and that. And the feedback came to kind of make it where it's going to be more like Minneapolis. And they also want to look at the sound too, like some of the things they were turning off the sound. And the community was saying, we want the sound. We could hear the traffic with or without the sound, but we want the sound identifying what the street is. So some of that, and trying to use uniform where making each stop look the same, was really important, brought up as well. So in a nutshell, those are the things that come to mind in those two committees. And next meeting, I'll be more prepared to be more precise on things. So thank you for giving me your generosity.
Thank you, Councilmember Sterner. Are there any questions for Councilmember Sterner on that report at all? All right, it was a great report, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I don't think we have Councilmember Lee in the meeting yet, so I will attempt to give you updates on the other two committees. I serve on management, and since our last EAC meeting, which actually Councilmember Ferguson, who chairs the management committee, was at that meeting, and so we gave you a bunch of updates then. Since then, mostly what management has been doing is, we're still in labor negotiations, so can't talk about that, but that has been taking up a chunk of the agenda for the management committee. Also, most of you know, or I hope you all know, that the executive team, or I should say leadership team, that's all of the committee chairs of the major committees, worked with the chair and had a process in place by which they selected a new Met Council administrator recently, and that is Mary Bogie, who has been the interim administrator in Meredith Vaddis's when she left the council. So it's a good day for the Met Council, and management actually looks at all of the salaries for our leadership and through all of the management work that we do throughout the administration. So I just wanted to report that out. In community development, at our last meeting, you know, as usual, we do a lot of the comprehensive plan updates and amendments that come to us, and that's the local guiding that is set by each community throughout the region and works to meet our housing goals and transportation goals and all of our systems goals that we have at the council. We're really getting at the end of the list for all of those that had to get their 2030 plans submitted. And so we're just finalizing a few of those. We're starting to see amendments to plans that had been submitted earlier now coming in. We also discussed a program that we launched last year, which was aimed at getting our housing choice vouchers in the hands of the project-based voucher developments more intently. So last year, what we did was we authorized up to 200 vouchers that as time comes, vouchers come off of line, people move on and move up and return their vouchers. So over a few years in the cycle, we know that we'll have vouchers that are coming back to Met Council. So what we did was last year we authorized that we did an RFP, request for proposal, from developers that have project-based affordable housing, really encouraging those that are at 30% of the area median income to come forward. Normally what we had done is we waited till after Minnesota Housing did their super RFP, and then we would come in behind that and work with developments on their vouchers. But we know that if developers have a contingent approval of vouchers for their own development, they'll score better at Minnesota Housing. So we tried to give that a shot last year, and out of the 200, meeting all of the goals and deadlines, we authorized 85 through about, I think, 5 or 6 developments that were in process at Met Council. One of the things that took up a little bit of our time at community development last time was we were going to do it again this year, but in March at one of our meetings, we had an informational item that said, you know, the staff was recommending that we just don't, we halt and we try to make sure that we've got enough vouchers again to continue to serve the waiting list. And as you all know, the waiting list is very long. People can be on it for up to 7 years. When we opened it up, I think we had 15,000 people that applied for it. And I think we've got, oh, I think it might be over 2,000 people on the list now. So it's pretty arduous. With that said, the development community that had not received the vouchers but had applied for them and didn't meet all the criteria wanted a chance to speak to community development committee about that. So we heard them at our last meeting. And I think the good news is we've got a lot of developers out there with projects in the pipeline that have actually gotten approval at the local level that are waiting for funding. But we all know that there's not enough funding. A lot of this, a vast majority of these developments are aimed at, again, 30% area median income or lower. It's also aimed at serving BIPOC communities and people who are working and in poverty or have special needs, disabilities. So what we'll do is, as we move forward, the Community Development Committee will continue to work with staff, and as we move into next year, try to figure out what's the best mix for addressing individual needs on the waiting list. Even though it's very difficult for people to oftentimes find the apartment that they need because of a lack of affordable housing out there, and trying to get more landlords to join into the program. And then also balancing out the needs of that pipeline so that projects that are already approved throughout the region don't fall by the wayside for lack of funding. So it was kind of a big issue, but again, community development and the housing team is really, really working hard at building in equity, creating programs or amending programs to build in scores around equity and authentic community engagement. So I see that as a really good sign. So anyway, that is that from my 2 committees as well. So if you have any questions or if you would like more information, the meetings are all online. We record our meetings. So if you do ever want to just go in and view the video and capture the last or the latest meetings from any of the 4 committees, you certainly can do so. And always encourage your feedback. So thank you. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. This is Irina. Councilmember Johnson, it looks like Brianne has a question.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Brianne. What question do you have for me?
Hi. So my question is related to the Community Development Committee. Have they talked about the housing policy plan update and the timing for that work?
We are in the middle of that now, and I don't have a specific answer for you, but I know that Lisa Barajas, the Director of Community Development, or Tara Beard, they're both leading that right now. We actually had a housing policy work group meeting scheduled for last Friday, and just because of agenda items and things and schedules, we didn't meet. So I don't have the latest on that, but I'd be happy if you want to shoot me an email, or I can, or if you know Lisa and Tara, you can certainly email them directly. I'm happy to ask the question for you, but I want to make sure if you shoot an email, then I'll get the question right and not miss anything.
Sure. I guess the main comment is that I would really like the EAC to be an integral part in the update of that policy plan, in particular, the housing subcommittee, affordable housing subcommittee of this group. And so I don't want to miss the opportunity to have a strong role in that update. And I think the time is right. The timing is right, which is a nice coincidence, I guess. Because often it's hard to plug into those 10-year, that policy plan only gets updated once every 10 years. So the fact that we have the opportunity to influence it now is really important to me, and I don't want to miss that. And I think the EAC has a really potentially strong and unique role in that housing policy plan update. So as a committee, I would just like to convey that information. Certainly I know Lisa and Tara pretty well, but I just want our committee to be able to influence that. And so however that makes sense to you, if you could just convey to them, that particularly the subcommittee would like to influence that. And again, that's speaking on personally, not on behalf of the subcommittee, but I think they would agree.
Thank you. And I just have a question. So I actually asked if we had a housing subcommittee, and I thought I was told, I could be wrong, but I thought I was told it's not quite active yet, because I was asking the same questions, like how can we get EAC wrapped into our processes, or potentially even being part of the housing policy work group too, where a lot of the early ideas come. So if I'm incorrect in that, and there are meetings taking place, or just I am happy to do exactly what you said, Brianne, if the committee wants. I just didn't realize that there was one formed in meeting yet. So, but I agree with you 100%. So I guess I just ask staff, or Madam Chair, is the group formed, and do they have meeting dates?
Edward is also raising his hand. My understanding is that the committee has been on hold while we seek a new subcommittee chair for that and reform, and also assess interest from our overall EAC committee. And Brianne, I appreciate the comment you just made, because that adds a little urgency to that. Edward, what else would you add?
You covered it all. Just to say that there are members. We lost a chairperson for the committee, and if there was a desire for staff to meet with us, I think we could convene the meeting, and that would be no problem as we still work through selecting a chairperson for the committee.
Yeah, if I could just jump in, we would be a committee that met frequently if we had such an important charge. How's that? If we had such a charge to influence the housing policy plan, perhaps that. Okay, great.
So Madam Chair, hearing all of that without objection, I'm happy then. Now there's clarity for me, right? Because truly members of that group as well are saying, how do we loop in the EAC? And I know they've come to you with pieces and bits, but I'm happy to make that request. That delights me. So I'll get an email off. I'll copy you, Leah, on that if it's okay, and staff as well, and just make that connection, and then work to get the housing committee members plugged into the process so that we can make it a better plan for everybody by the time we adopt it throughout the process. So thanks, Brianne, for bringing that up. And thank you, Edward, for your comments as well. I'm really happy to do that.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions about the standing committee updates before we move into our subcommittee updates? All right, seeing none, I would like to just give a little bit of a process suggestion for the housing subcommittee. Edward has been on the subcommittee, and Edward, maybe you and I can work to plan an outreach to both previous members and other EAC members that might want to serve on that to get that conversation going and affirm membership in that committee. So as I mentioned, it's been a little bit on hold, and Edward and I can work to revamp that together. Would that work for you, Edward?
Yes.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, when I send the email to Tara and Director Barajas, I'll make sure that they'll work with you, and that way the timing will work with your committee when everybody's ready to rock and roll. And thank you. This is really good news, so appreciate it.
Great. Good. Well, this is the time in our agenda where we will give updates from our subcommittees. So we have members of both the Operations Subcommittee and the Transportation Subcommittee here today. T, would you be ready to give an update from the Transportation Subcommittee?
Sure. And Sarah is not with us today. She's with her family, so yay for her. But our update is that we're building relationship with TAB and other transportation departments, so which is good. And so I know that Sarah had reached out to Holly and Abdullah, so we're going to hear the presentation today. So that's going to be good. So I'm excited to hear. And I think Sarah and I work really well together, but we would also like to invite other committee members who want to be on the subcommittee transportation subcommittee to reach out to us, because we would love to have other people on there. And right now we're just really learning a lot about how the MnDOT and the Met Transit works within the Met Council, and then we are working together. We used to meet once a month, but at this point we haven't met lately, but we will start meeting again once a month. So, and I think that's about it. And I can't wait to hear the presentation today.
Thank you so much. Edward, would you like to give our Operations Subcommittee update, or would you prefer I do so?
I can. You can add in whatever I miss. We continue to meet regularly, at least once a month. And our last meeting, we met with the OEO staff and continue to have discussions about what data is available, equity data is available, understanding that data and how it applies to what we're trying to achieve. We have put together our monthly meeting schedule. We are asking others that would like to be a part of the operation committee to join us. Our next effort, I believe is scheduled, or at least it's being worked on to be scheduled, is that the OEO staff has developed or in the process of developing a dashboard to track equity data. And they will allow us to have some input on the design of that. And so I'm excited about that, and I think other committee members are, and taking a look at that, because it would be current time ready information that we can draw on to track how we're performing as it relates to the implementation of goals that we've set in that committee to expand equitable opportunity in hiring and in contracting in those areas. I don't know, did I miss anything? If I did, Leah, go ahead.
I think you got it. And I'm not sure that I see everybody's name in the participant list. I don't think Dr. Sheikh or Michael Luceni are here this evening. So I don't know. No, I don't think they're here. So that was great. Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to talk about our main presentation for today. And before we get into the presentation from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, I want to note that at our standing committee meeting last month, we also planned for a presentation from the equity teams, the council's equity teams, similar to the transit equity team that presented last month. Those equity teams asked for an extension to present next month or later rather than this month. So when we have our next standing committee meeting, we'll consider that request as we develop our upcoming agendas. So I wanted to give everybody an update about that had been curious if they were going to be presenting this month. Is our speaker here from MnDOT?
I am checking. I do not believe she is on yet. So when I was speaking with Holly, she was saying that she was going to get on probably around 6:45. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule right now. So she's not quite on yet.
Okay. I think what I'll do is go to the next item on our agenda then, about the U.S. Department of Transportation request for information, if that's okay with everybody. The U.S. Department of Transportation has issued a request for information where there is an opportunity to give the U.S. DOT feedback around its measures around equity. They have a pretty extensive set of questions, and there is essentially a public comment process where we can submit our response to some or all of the questions posed. And my question for this committee is, when presented with opportunities like this to give input, what kinds of preferences do committee members have? Do you want to be just informed of them and able to respond on your own? Would you like us to do a process where we could respond as a group and have our voice shared as a body and as representatives of the Equity Advisory Committee? What sort of preferences do you have when there are opportunities like that to weigh in on public policies and public requests for information? Go ahead, Brianne.
So I would say first, either way, particularly depending on the deadline. So the time that the staff asked us to comment on the equity initiative budget request, special budget, whatever it was called, and we only had 5 days, then I would say in that case, we definitely want to just respond individually to influence any potential outcome. But if we have time, it would be nice to spend a little time compiling our opinions as a group and discussing. If it's a survey, that's pretty hard to respond to as a group. So if it's like a survey monkey, then we would probably have to do it separately. But if it's like a Word document questionnaire, maybe we could route it around and do it that way. I think the probably least effective would be to just like take 10 minutes on our agenda to talk about it. You know, we don't have a lot of time together. So if we had an hour or two to talk about it, then maybe, but short of that, I think a number of different strategies could be used depending on how much time we have and the level of importance. For example, in this one, I think the transportation subcommittee could potentially get together and prepare a response that we could all just review. That might be one strategy for this particular request, but I definitely think as individuals and or as a committee, we definitely want to respond to something like this.
Great. What other perspectives do people have? Nicole?
We can't hear you.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Nicole speaking. Okay. I like what Brianne said in terms of like a time frame, like if it's a shorter time frame, of course, we may not have that much time to convene, but I'd like to consult with someone. I don't know if that's available, just because like when I got that email, I really don't know the history. I need a little bit more context to what I'm, you know, I can give tons of feedback on transportation, but I want it to be really substantial. You know, I just need a little bit of history and just some more information on it. You know, when I read through it, I read that they wanted some more data, and if someone could just kind of bring me up to speed, then I feel like I could have a more robust response. I hope that makes sense. But I like what Brian said in terms of like the time frame. If it's shorter, of course, individual. If it's longer, you know, maybe we have time together. But for me, since I'm newer, I just want some more context to that, and I don't know who I would reach out for that to. But that's my response. Thank you.
Thank you. How about others? Any others have some thoughts about how you'd like to respond to requests for information or other place where we could give advice or perspectives?
I like what Brianne and Nicole said. I actually agree with them. It depends on the time frame. I think if we have longer time to be able to convene, but if we have shorter time, maybe individually. And like since this is on transportation, maybe me and Sarah could get together and write up something from the transportation subcommittee too might be good. Things like that. Or if it was on housing, the housing committee or operations, the operations committee. So maybe the subcommittees could get in there and put in their 2 cents and things like that. So yeah. But otherwise, I like what Brianne and Nicole said.
Great. Judy, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. So to Nicole's point, is there somebody on staff that could get some information for people who might want a bit of a background and send it out to everybody? Maybe not everybody needs it, but just so that people could be more ready to respond. I think that's, Nicole, what I think I heard you say. And I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that that loop gets closed so that you get that information. So, you know, maybe we could reach back to, I don't know if it'd be Nick on staff or probably, but just somebody to do. Maybe Cy, is there, or Arena, is there a way you guys could reach back to Nick or somebody on the transportation team at Met Council and just find out how to best get maybe just some background information for EAC on this?
This is Cy Jordan. We can try to determine what information we can find out. This is the federal government, USDOT, and we received the notice, and so we've passed it out for others who want to contribute feedback in this process. Their deadline is June 24th. What I'm looking at here is they have a general contact us line. I can check with our internal planning department through Nick's department to see if they have an actual contact that can give us some context with regard to this RFI.
Madam Chair, thank you, Cy. And even if Nick can just say, oh yeah, they do this every now and then, and this is what usually happens, and this is the type of things that we as Met Council have submitted in the past, or something like that. Even, you know, I know that the timing is a little tight, but Nick's just like the keeper of so much information, right? Maybe he could just give that bit of an overview to, like, what are they looking for? How does it work? Things like that might be helpful.
One other thing I'm wondering about is that makes me think that one of the things that would be helpful context is, does the Met Council already have some priorities that they are moving forward that we as EAC members could either respond to and think about from an equity lens, or we could amplify because they really align with some of the things that we've been prioritizing. So, so along with the more general context, are there some priorities or messages that council staff are going to be sharing in response to this request for information?
Madam Chair, I'll make sure I loop in Councilmember Barber, who's Chair of Transportation, and I can also touch base with Nick and just ask those couple of things too, if that makes sense, because I have to reach out to them anyway on a couple of other issues. But your point is well taken. If Met Council's going to officially submit something, I don't know, but I can't imagine we wouldn't in some form or fashion. But yeah, if there's you know, some extra emphasis that we can put around equity and you guys can help make that happen, that'd be huge.
Thank you for those insights, everyone, about the timing, the ability to collaborate and consult with each other, and the opportunity to hear some context. Anything else that people would want to raise up? This will not be our only group that reaches out and gives us an opportunity to give input. So anticipating that there'll be more ahead. If there's anything else you'd like to share, happy to hear it. All right, hearing none, I understand that our speaker is here. So we want to welcome Abdullahi Abdul from the Minnesota Department of Transportation to introduce us to the state's equity efforts surrounding the statewide multimodal transportation plan. As we're hearing our presentation as members of the EAC, we would love to hear, are there places where our advice or input would most be valuable? T, is there anything else you'd like to add to get us started or prepared for this conversation?
Actually, no. I just can't wait to hear Hallie and the presentation and move from there. So welcome, Hallie, and thank you for coming tonight.
Oh, thank you. It's such a pleasure. It's with great disappointment that Abdullahi is not able to join us tonight, but he sends his regards from Savannah, where he is currently in the middle of a very heavy agenda as a Transportation Justice Fellow as part of NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So we're really lucky to have him on board. You get me tonight. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all. So Hallie Turner, she, her, I am Policy Planning Director at Minnesota Department of Transportation. We're here today to talk to you about our transportation equity working definition. And I want to be very clear, because there was a prompt at the top of the introduction to highlight the opportunity to get feedback, advice, influence, and we have a draft definition to talk to you about today. But I'm going to do some context setting, because sometimes people like to know, how did we even get to where we're at? Is it okay if I just say next slide to go ahead and proceed?
Yes, please.
Okay,
do.
perfect. All right, next slide. So I'm going to start first taking you back to 2015, 2016, when we were updating the statewide multimodal transportation plan. To save time, I'm going to start calling it SMTP. So when you hear that acronym, just know that I'm talking about the highest transportation policy plan in Minnesota. And it sits under the Minnesota Go vision, which says that Minnesota's multimodal transportation system maximizes the health of people, the environment, and the economy. This is all modes, all the ways that people travel in Minnesota. So even though it's a MnDOT-led vision for transportation, it ultimately influences transportation decisions across jurisdictions. In 2015, 2016, when we were out talking to the public about what this vision means for policy in Minnesota, people were really zeroing in on health, because we know that a lot of members of our communities experience health inequitably. Next slide. Just to orient you where everything kind of sits in this hierarchy, we have the Minnesota Go vision that I just shared with you that answers what are we trying to achieve. So looking out 50 years, where are we trying to go? The statewide multimodal transportation plan, SMTP, answers how are we going to achieve it. And then this policy direction flows to all of our modal and system plan that includes walking, biking, taking transit, airports, ports, waterways, all of the ways that Minnesotans travel. Next slide. But the equity is explicitly being embedded at statewide multimodal transportation plan level. And this sets overarching objectives, strategies, and performance measures for all the ways we travel. It was last adopted in 2017. It will be due in early 2022. And once this policy guidance is set, it flows to the rest of those investment and policy decisions for our different modes of travel. Next slide. We have 6 focus areas that we are trying to dig a little bit deeper into as part of the statewide multimodal transportation plan. I said I would use the acronym, and then I don't think I've used it once since. At any rate, for the SMTP, we have aging infrastructure, climate change, economy and employment, safety and transportation options, and of course, equity. So these are the topics in which we're trying to understand Minnesotans' lived experiences within the context of these focus areas and across these focus areas, so that we can try to be as specific as possible about what it would mean to actually implement our plan. We have been told that the SMTP, because it's for all modes, for all Minnesotans, means that it's absolutely nothing for nobody. And we have been encouraged to be specific. And these are the 6 focus areas in which we're trying to dig deep and be as specific as possible, if not even directive. Next slide. And as part of this work, we are having the conversation about, like, what does equity even mean? I had mentioned we started the conversations in 2015, 2016. I have a few more details to share with you about what we've been up to since, but we are really trying to understand, what does transportation equity mean within the context of this policy planning process? Next slide. So since 2018, we have been embarking on the Advancing Transportation Equity Initiative. That is a suite of different activities. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these today, because I really want to hear your reactions and your input on the equity definition. So if you have any questions on any of these, when I'm done, please do not hesitate to reach out to me or Abdullahi, whose contact information was shared with you all. So we've had a couple of research projects. We had one that set out a research roadmap for equity. It was specifically geared at state departments of transportation and where we could help guide equity in transportation. We have one currently underway around performance measures and one about to kick off around gender equity. We're actually partnering with the Metropolitan Council to use the Travel Behavior Inventory, TBI, as one of our data sources in the gender equity research project. For community conversations, we have been going to district by district in greater Minnesota, so not in the Twin Cities, but in greater Minnesota, having conversations with organizations that serve or represent people that are not typically included in transportation, just having conversations about, what does transportation equity look like in your community and for the people you serve. For equitable contracting and engagement, Here we're trying to explore how MnDOT processes are impairing the ability to be able to partner with community-based organizations. As I'm sure many people in this space today know, that community-based organizations have really, just by nature of being community-based, have really incredible work going on, and we would love to see how we could augment some of the fantastic work that's already happening and partner in collaboration with MnDOT projects. And we have seen that we are the hurdle, that our processes require a lot of administrative work to be able to get over them, if you can even go through those hurdles, and a lot of organizations don't have the resources to be able to do that. Program and process review is a really fancy way at describing a really messy meeting, in which we, in one case, we did a retrospective of a public engagement process on one plan to ask, how would this have changed if equity had been embedded front and center when this process happened? And then we had also looked proactively at a strategic plan for safe routes to school to say, how can we explicitly embed equity in their safe routes to school? And they ended up including equity as one of their guiding principles, plus strategies throughout their strategic plan. I've already mentioned performance measures and then updated plans. So that's what we're talking to you about today. So next slide. I want to share with you a couple of lessons learned. These might not come across as earth-shattering, but they were helpful for an organization like MnDOT to hear. First off, we have heard that we need to identify a definition or target populations. We need to have a means by which we determine what is in the scope of the equity work that we're doing and what's out of scope. In absence of a definition or target populations, we have found that everything has been in, which means that we have individuals that also like to think that geography is one of the means by which we're also discussing equity, and that is not necessarily the case. We have had a challenge for acknowledging what transportation equity even means. So it's also been helpful for us to think about, what does it mean for an agency like MnDOT to be committed to transportation equity? We also need to acknowledge the history of inequities within the current planning context. A lot of our processes by design kind of center on this moment that we're living, looking forward, and have conversations about how to mitigate potential harms, but yet we don't always do a good job centering in on the current moment that we're living and the historic harms that we're bringing with us into this space. And many of our conversations have acknowledged that these are not honest conversations because we're not truly centering in the lived experience, recent and long-term, of folks that we are in relationship with. So we can't start any of our processes without acknowledging the history of inequities and harm in this as well. Equitable engagement, already talked about, it's necessary and not sufficient. It's absolutely a means by which to make sure that we are including people in decision making, but if that's the only thing that we're doing, we're going to perpetuate inequities, oppression, and harm. We also need statewide solutions to advance equity, because when we're focused on like one neighborhood at a time, there are opportunities where we can capitalize on partnerships and resources to be able to invest in assets, invest in community solutions, et cetera, that would be beyond a scope of just a neighborhood. So we can also look for opportunity for statewide solutions. And also MnDOT operates by districts, so we tend to be really district focused, and there's a lot of challenges that transcend arbitrary boundaries like MnDOT districts. And we need to move beyond research to implementation. Many members of our communities are living in crisis right now. They needed us to act decades ago. They don't need us to research the same problems again and again. So next slide. We are, within this context, we've been wanting to ask, what does transportation equity look like? And especially with Abdullahi's feedback, it's important to note that this image is simplistic. It does highlight the equal and equitable are not the same thing. And this is where we can get caught up in the challenges of distributions of resources without paying attention to what resources, tools, opportunities, and challenges that people have. And that's not wholly contained within this image. Transportation equity instead is helping us helping to try to understand people's needs by letting them tell their own stories and not speak on their behalf. Transportation equity is really about humanizing our transportation system, seeing beyond turn lanes, streetlights, sidewalks, etc., and especially seeing beyond vehicle level of service, and that we are centering specifically on the problems that we're trying to address and the harms that have disproportionately affected Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So what we're ultimately wanting to connect with you about today is a draft definition that we have for transportation equity. This is by no means intended to be considered final. It was formed with input from an equity work group that's a part of the statewide multimodal transportation plan. I am happy to chat a link of the membership so that you all can see who was included in the work group. So we ultimately had the work group that is a mix of internal MnDOT staff and external partners put forward this draft definition that's for the purpose of being able to get public input. Sometimes it's easier to ask people to react to something than to craft their own definition. So this was the process that we thought would work, hopefully. And we are spending the summer getting input from committees like yours to ultimately include the feedback in the final definition that will be included in the SMTP anticipated to be adopted in early 2022. So without further ado, I will ask you to go to the next slide and unveil our working definition. I will give you a moment to sit with this. Our working definition says, transportation equity ensures the benefits and burdens of transportation spending, services, and systems are fair, which historically have not been fair, and people, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, are empowered in transportation decision-making. What stood out to you? What reactions do you have when you first see this definition?
I see Nicole, you have your hand up.
Sorry about that. Nicole speaking. I guess what stands out to me is really like the services, the services that are provided. When does community voice or participant voice or client voice, I'm not sure what they call, the residents, I would say residents who use the services. A lot of times people, they just kind of get told what the service is going to be, and then there's really no input in terms of like what do they really what does the community need. And so what comes to mind is services. I know what lived experience, I know we needed buses to drop kids off at the school, and a lot of other cities have allowed that, but there was no community voice for the community that I lived in. So just when I think of services, just sometimes a community voice or a resident voice was not taken into, factor when they provided those services. So that's what just comes to mind. Thank you.
And I think Anita, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, thank you. This is Anita. When I look at the word ensures, and sometimes to me that's a weak word because we have a lot of laws and services and benefits that should ensure that they're meted out equally, but they're not. And so I'm trying to think of a better word than ensures, because to me that just is weak. But I like the idea that it recognized that historically the system hasn't been fair in terms of services and spending with regard to transportation. The last thing I'd want to say is that the last line, they are empowered in transportation decision making. We hear the word a lot, outreach and engagement. And we know that true engagement means engaging individuals who receive these services from the beginning of the idea to the end. And as Nicole said, usually that happens after a decision has been made. So then engagement in the community after decisions been made means calling a community meeting, having people show up, and then somebody say, this is what we're doing. And so I'd like to see, if you're going to say empower and just decision making, truly make sure that you do empower in that decision making from start to finish. Thank you.
If I'm quiet, it's because this is Hallie speaking.
I know, I see your head.
I mean, yeah, I'm also taking notes so that Abdullahi has all this great feedback. I'm trying to do good service by the great feedback that you all are providing.
Thanks. I saw you shaking your head, so I got that.
I see Edward and Councilmember Johnson and Brianne's hand up. So why don't we go with Edward next and then Brianne? Edward, if you're talking, we don't hear you. You might still be on mute.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, thank you, Hallie, for the presentation. It's great to see MnDOT being conscientious in this manner. I guess the thing that jumped out to me was early on in the presentation and in this final work, it seemed that the acknowledgement of wrong is acceptable. So we're going to move on from that point. You were discriminated against, you were not utilized, you were not even considered as a part of anything we were doing. And we will acknowledge we did that to you without any atonement or reconciliation or providing any kind of make-up preference going forward for what had purposefully happened in the past. And that, while for some that can satisfy, and maybe, you know, your committee was totally satisfied with the powers to be to say, yeah, we stepped all over you. We didn't even consider you a factor in anything we've done for the last 150 years. And we will acknowledge that and we'll just move forward from here. That to me is a form of inequity as well. So the trauma of that seemed like it won't be dealt with. Maybe because a construct identifier has been put in there like Black, maybe that is a further acknowledgement. That term, or Indigenous, or people of color, I guess for me, it just doesn't go far enough. It doesn't, it just seems like the term ensures, and the comment made earlier, it's all just feel good for the perpetrators, and without really any true intentions for it to be fair going forward.
May I ask a follow-up? Thank you for your comments. Is there anything top of mind that comes for you and how we could shift this to meet your critique that it's not strong enough? That this in and of itself is not acknowledging the long legacy of harm and violence that's been done to communities.
It also seems to say that what you're going to do is allow for Black, Indigenous, and people of color to be empowered to participate in decision making. But it doesn't seem to suggest that you're going to share the spending. You're going to, give preference with spending because of the harm, give priority with services because of the harm, that you're going to evaluate and ensure that every step along the way does not continue the harm. Even in the policy, it says that if you're underutilizing or you're not, you're causing harm from an environmental standpoint, or you don't even perform environmental justice studies, that you are violating, the rights of those people. The way this reads is like, well, we're going to acknowledge, and going forward, we're going to ensure that that you're part of the decision making. I mean, I think there should be more, and there should be some kind of preference given, stronger consideration because of the harm. Now, that's just my opinion, okay? And I know that's a tough bar to climb, but to me, it would be the only righteous thing to do. And that doesn't mean that anybody else have to be sacrificed. It's just that you're really, truly going to try to make sure that you're given some preference. You're going to target it in a very special kind of way. I don't even see things in there like we will target spending and services to make up for the harm and not just live off of an acknowledgement that it was caused.
Thank you. I think we'll do, Brianne, your hand is not up anymore, so we'll do Councilmember Johnson and then Nalima. And then Brianne, if you still want to make a comment, go ahead and stick your hand back up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. I'm still getting used to how to work the hand. So my hand wasn't supposed to be up. My apologies.
All right. Nalima, how about you?
You've got mail.
So, can you hear me? Okay. So, thank you. I think Edward articulated most of what I wanted to say. That I felt the same way, that there's an acknowledgement of the historical injustices, but I think there's no indication that those are going to mitigate it. To be mitigated. It just seems like, okay, let's just move forward from here. And that is not an equitable way of doing things, because if we're not starting from the same starting point, those who have been left behind are never going to catch up unless those circumstances are mitigated. And so if there is no plan to mitigate the past harm that has been done, then it's going to be very challenging to get to an equitable place. If equity, is really our goal. And there are many examples about the number. I don't want to say many. I say maybe a few examples I know of around the country where people are in the same place looking at their aging infrastructure and figuring out how do we mitigate now that the infrastructure is aging and we're really looking at this thing, how do we mitigate these issues, because there's some things that really have to be mitigated physically, and there's good examples around the country around where some very robust conversations about that are happening in terms of transportation, and especially the expansion of highways. The other thing I will say, just two more things real quick. One, I realized when you're doing the presentation, there are all these buckets. And, it might be ironical saying this, being a member of the Equity Advisory Committee, but the experience and the common practice, everybody likes to talk about equity, and then we take equity and make it this other thing sitting in the side. So we're going to do all these things and then plus equity. No, if we're going to embrace equity, then equity should be embodying everything. It should become a practice. We should institutionalize it. We should be operating from an equity lens. So equity is not this other thing that sits here, right? And then we're going to do all these things, and then we're going to do equity over here. No, we should be doing all these things equitably and through an equity lens. Equity should be the lens that we're operating in. And finally, the word ensures is not very strong. When it comes to, I'm all for engaging communities of color to participate in these conversations, but also being very careful about, we don't just want to invite people into frustration. I mean, let's be clear about what is the real power that people are going to have, and let's be clear about it from the very beginning. But also what is lacking out here is, I'd really like to say about outcomes, So community, we really want to be at the table, but we have to think about why do we always want to be at the table? Because we know if we're not at the table, we're not going to be considered. But how do we get to but after all that conversation, we don't just want to check a box and say that, we engage community. What we need to be measuring is the outcome. It doesn't matter the intention, it doesn't matter how much engagement. What is critical is the outcome. What is going to be the result, of the work after we have done all these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Nalima. Brianne.
Thank you, Hallie. Thank you for your presentation and for the work that you've done. I was around in the 5-year plan last time, and this is a dramatic shift for MnDOT. So it's very refreshing to see a focus on this work, and particularly the comment you made about geographic equity and that being a way that people sort of water down what equity really is. And so fighting against that is a human's attempt, so good luck. And I really appreciate the previous 2 comments and just add, empowered transportation decision making is important, but yes, and the spending services and systems are, moving forward compensate for those historically unfair. I think having something that specifically addresses that historic unfairness is really good, but then what are we going to do moving forward? To address that. And I would be really curious to hear how this working definition gets incorporated into decisions. Infrastructure investments often become the 99% of spending bucket, and the excuse that we have these bridges we have to maintain and we have these highways we have to maintain ends up becoming the priority. But what about removing some of the infrastructure that we have so we don't have to maintain it, and just that kind of conversation, or undoing the highways, removing some of the highways that have, undoing those unequitable decisions, and then also saving money because we don't have to maintain them. I would like to see some reference or discussion about disinvestment in the inordinate amounts of infrastructure that we've put into place that benefits the car and have been made at the hands or at the disruption of communities. So what are some things that are going to be undone? And I know that is crazy for MnDOT to be thinking about, but that's just kind of my added input as to what infrastructure are we going to remove to address the fact that we can't maintain it and afford to maintain it, and the fact that it rips communities apart. So I would love to see something in there, but maybe that's for the next 5-year plan update.
Thank you. I'll add a comment while seeing if anyone else raises their hand to make a comment. My comment really aligns with what my colleagues have shared so far, and I would offer that it might be important to even take one step further back from defining equity to actually define transportation and what its purpose is, and then make sure that that underlying purpose is equitably experienced by a variety of communities. So is the purpose of transportation, as you mentioned, for so long has been defined by numbers of vehicles that can move through a corridor in a given time. But maybe the purpose, if defined more with a focus on people, could highlight where we need to see equity. Like maybe the purpose is the ability to link people to the jobs that they want to have, or to live the full lives that they want to have, or to access the recreation that they want to access, to really be able to live their highest quality of life. And if we take the definition of transportation really to heart, then how we look at equity is really going to change and may include some disinvestment in our existing infrastructure and significant investments in other types of aspects of that underlying purpose. And I'll just pause to see if any other hands go up, and then okay, I'm seeing a couple hands go up. So Brianne, I'm not sure if your hand went back up, so I'll pause on that. But I think Councilmember Johnson and then Edward.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just be really brief. Appreciate the opportunity to hear about the transportation plan and where you're at on everything, especially around equity. I think one of the things we're working at the council on our own plan, which I know folds into the big plan, we all work together, right? Is one of the things that we're trying to raise is that we've got our 4 big goals at the council, and ending racism, building equity, closing gaps, right, through all the systems has to be a priority. But, well, let me say, and, not but, and what I'm frustrated by is when we do a lot of the planning and we're engaging community, and we've got maps and we've got overlays and we've got all this data and we've got census tracts and we've got a lot of data. What I would like to do is start applying our work and our plans directly to our goals, so that when we overlay, in our case, new routes, new transportation systems, and we've got this data and we're an engaging community, all stakeholders, we can see then how it will impact our goals, right? So it's one thing to have goals, but then if your plans are really disconnected in a meaningful way from the plan, you don't really get where you want to go, and we just keep getting what we got, right? So where I'm going with this is when we talk about a new route and we overlay that on the regional map, it would be nice to see then how it impacts housing, how it impacts incomes, how it impacts opportunities, how it closes gaps and works to end disparities. I mean, we've got data. We know things are not going in a good direction coming out of COVID for sure, right? So I'm just trying to get a better sense of how the plans show us what those impacts could be to reach our goals based on the data that we have. And where we don't have data, how can we get it? Because I just want to ensure that it's data driven towards equity and environment and all the other things, right? And we use that as well to help build the plans and make the decisions, and I'll do it in the right order, as other people have said too.
Thank you. Edward. We don't hear you yet.
I like the commissioner's idea. I think that's a good idea, overlaying like that and then seeing impact in a lot of different ways, negative versus how you can build opportunity through what you're doing, and leave communities whole versus what has happened historically. The other thing about this, and I really appreciate the work you guys put into this, Hallie, And I know it's always hard to write these things and then, bring them out for, the quarterbacks on Tuesday evenings to comment on them. They didn't play in the game, so. But I hope you don't take any of this in an offensive way. It's just that we just want to be honest and and help with the process of getting it right. But I also think that this term equity is, we have to be careful with it because it begins to substitute for things that are legally required, like equal opportunity, and that's not here anywhere in this. So for someone who have seen this, it's almost like a safe term to use because the only requirement is that somehow fairness has been supplanted for equal opportunity in spending or utilization of those funds, or equal opportunity in services, or all of those things. So fairness, equity is how most people will look at it. I know there's all kind of running definitions for it. It's a soft sell. It's a soft sell. I think for a lot of us, we really want the practice of equal opportunity as defined in law to be achieved. Executive Order 11246, which was established in 1968, Title VII and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and the equal opportunity provisions in there. But it almost seems like entities don't want to go there. T21 civil rights rules that were established years ago as the equity approach to equal opportunity in these things. And so the extent to which those terms, nothing wrong with using equity, but the terms equal opportunity are there. If it's stated, then there is a good chance that it will be worked towards some type of achievement. I remember in 2013, sidebar, and then I'm shut up, I saw a report on the state spending in its transportation funds, which was something like over $400 million in that year, 2013. Black businesses received $914 in contracts from $400 million in spending. And it almost moved you to tears because everything in the studies and data that we read said there was more than enough willing and able Black business enterprises to achieve an 8 to 10% utilization rate in transportation. But for some reason, somebody decided that that community was only worthy of a $914 contract. So those are the things to just acknowledge that wrong for some. A lot of people don't even know that, but for a lot that have been watching this close, it's not enough. And atonement, reconciling, and then a strategy to have outcomes to make those who were victims whole as you move forward. Because the less opportunity they got, less capacity they built. So maybe it's a special kind of way of building capacity so that they can compete at a certain level. And the last thing I'll say about it is when those opportunities don't go to those communities, within that budget year, those dollars have to be spent. That means that somebody else benefited even greater than what equity or fairness would have been. And they have achieved at a greater level. And this definition right now says, even though you didn't get your fair opportunity, we're now going to make it fair as we go forward, which means that it won't be fair because those who got the unfair, favorable treatment are now so far ahead of everybody else that they will outcompete them going forward. So I'll leave it at that, but thank you very much for bringing this, and I hope that insight is a little helpful.
Thank you, Edward. I see, I think it's Anita that you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hallie, I appreciate you bringing this to us as well. As I'm listening to everybody, one of the things that makes me think is something that I've thought for so many years. When I see something like this is written down, you're calling it a working definition. And to me, I said the word ensure to me was weak. And when I think about it and I read this and I think this to me is, for lack of a better way of putting it, is like dipping your toe in the water. And I would like to see some language that is more bold. And I'm going to say to you, just jump right in. Just jump into the water and get wet. Immerse yourself and get fully wet and be bold and be courageous and start writing out working definitions that are meaningful, because this looks to me like um, a wishful mission statement. This is what we wish that would happen. And what we're looking for today and now are years of looking at, as Michael said, soft language like this. And we need something bolder. We need something stronger. And this is the time to do it. Because as I agree with Michael, the communities are so far behind right now because of language like this. It's soft and not bold. And we need organizations and agencies and government and people to be bold and just jump in that water and say what makes change. Use words that will make definite change. That's it.
Thank you, everybody. This was a really great conversation. I think we will wrap up at this point. Hallie, do you have any final thoughts or reflections or things you heard that you're planning to really emphasize as you go back?
Oh my gosh, everything. Like I have zero chill about the great feedback that you all provided, and I feel really, really selfish that I was able to be here filling in for Abdullahi. There are a couple slides left that I don't feel like I necessarily need to go through, but I did just want to let you all know that in the presentation, you'll find more information about the timeline for wrapping up this definition. We also have the opportunity for people to provide feedback on this definition on our website, including comics by a local Minnesota artist, Noah Lawrence Holder. That's a non-binary artist based in Minneapolis that did fantastic comics for us around each of our focus areas, and we have one around equity as well. So share the link with anyone that you would like to provide input on this. We would love to hear any and all feedback. I just really want to, I was a little distracted because I was trying to chat the link at you, so it's now in the chat. But I just want to thank you all for allowing me to spend time with you and being really honest and candid in what you're sharing. It's conversations like this by which we're actually able to make the meaningful change that you all are really calling us to the table to do. So thank you for being willing to have these conversations with us. And Abdullahi and I look forward to coming back to letting you know, hopefully, the great magic that we worked on this definition based on your feedback. Thank you all so much for having me today.
Thank you, Hallie.
Thank you. For all of our members, Irina included the presentation slides with our packet this month, so you should see them there. And Hallie did put in the chat some links for us. So you should have the resources you need, but please reach out if you are not able to find them. I hear we have a quorum, so we are going to do our business. So we're going to start with, let's see, what is our first thing we're going to do? Call this meeting to order and do a roll call. So Irina, are you ready for that?
I am indeed, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. So we are going to do a roll call. I'm going to call all the committee members by last name. So when I call your name, if you will please indicate that you are here by yes, I, however you would indicate, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Block. She is excused. Ellis McGregor.
Here.
Goldstein Moses.
Here.
Gonzalez, he is excused. Jenkins. Johnson.
Here.
Lee. Buseni. McDonald.
Here.
Miller, she is excused. Way.
Here.
Rothstein.
Here.
Rudolph, she is excused. Shake. See that you're here.
I'm here.
Thank you. Sitate Munene.
Here.
Sterner.
Here.
Irvina Davis.
Here.
Thank you.
And Nalima and Edward, I see you both have your hands up. We are going to do approval of the minutes next. Is there something you wanted to say before we do that business, either of you?
My comments can wait if you want to go ahead with that.
Okay, how about you, Nalima?
Sorry,
Okay.
no, I don't know.
That's
I
all
took
right.
your hand down, Nalima.
No worries. All right, so we're going to do our approval of our minutes from the May 18th meeting. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from that meeting?
Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, Arena, go ahead and call our roll call vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Block. Ellis McGregor. Goldstein Moses.
Approved.
Gonzalez. Jenkins. Johnson.
Aye.
Lee. Buseni. McDonald.
Yes.
Miller. Way.
Here. Yes.
Rothstein.
Yes.
Rudolph. Shake.
Yes.
Sitate Munene.
Yes.
Sterner.
Aye.
Ravina Davis.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Arena, for taking us through that. I have an announcement. I see Edward has his hand up. And then also, Anita, I wanted to let you know in advance that I might put you on the spot if you have an update about that committee that you've been serving on as well. So we'll, if you feel ready when we get to that part, there'll be some space for you to share. So
Okay, thanks.
the announcement that I have is that our standing committee meets virtually via WebEx. We always meet the Tuesday after our EAC meeting. And at that meeting, we have a little bit more free-form discussion. We talk about our agenda. Last month, we also talked a little bit about how to manage the agenda, which you saw show up today when we just had this discussion about the transportation equity statement. We've been preparing our speakers to come specifically with a way, something that they'd like to engage us about that we can give advice on. I encourage you to attend our next standing committee meeting, which will be next week from 5:30 to 6:30. You should have a meeting invite, but please reach out if you don't see the connection information, and you'll get the chance to contribute to our future agenda items. So, Edward, what did you have to share?
Yeah, I just wanted to just throw this on the table because I think it's important for folks who are, you know, leading these efforts and invite in communities of color to the table to help with defining these definitions or strategies, there is an element of fear that resonates with many when it comes to, wanting to do the right thing, but also not wanting to be ostracized because they're giving honest input. And I don't know how to explain this, but I see it a lot, and that there is a dynamic where people will be invited. They could be contractors who want to do work for MnDOT, and MnDOT invite them to the table to help them with developing a definition, and they're kind of led to create definitions. I'm not saying that this is the case with this one at all. But when they come back out to the community, because they want an opportunity, they want that opportunity to work with Met Council. They want that contract with Department of Transportation. They want that employment opportunity, with those entities, that they're not totally candid about it. But when they come back to the community and you see them at the barbershop, or you see them at the church, or you see them somewhere else, they say, I wish I had just been, just blunt about this. But I didn't want those people to look at me as the person that they should shun, because I was being very honest about the harm that's caused. And I could have added some other things, but I really didn't think they wanted to go there. I think it was better for me to just be in their good graces, and they see me as the good guy. And that way I'll get an opportunity, and they won't shun me, and I can feed my family, and I can do my work. And I'm just saying, the folks that facilitate these dynamics need to kind of understand that a lot of times in your audience, you get people that are coming there to participate, but they fear being honest and forthright, and will kind of appease in hope of getting an opportunity they desperately need or want. And so they go along with the program. I just want to put it on the table because I've been seeing that even a lot more these days than I probably ever have. And they get labeled. They get labeled. They don't want to be labeled as the troublemaker or the one who is blunt about it. And there's some of us who kind of follow John, the congressman's things, create some good trouble, because it's important to move the system forward and to be honest about these things, not just to accept them. But I think there's many that come with those types of things that want us to just rubber stamp it and keep it business as usual. But it just can't be that way. Too many humans are being lost because of unfairness. So I just want to put it on the table, that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, did you want to respond to that before we take Anita's update? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, I really appreciate that, and I needed to hear that, and here's why. So we have requests for proposals, put out for bids on these major construction of light rail and transportation projects. And, if there's federal funding, we're bound by their rules. And if it's state funding, we're bound by their rules. And, this is really a solid issue that is in management right now. And Chair Ferguson, who you heard from last month, is really pushing this, and he's part of the BIPOC Council Committee. With all that said, though, we put out an RFP, right, recently, and we did have a couple of small business owners of color tell us that there were things woven into the RFP that has federal mandates to it, that you have to meet this criteria, and this has to be engaged, and that has to be engaged, which really puts up the barriers where majority community is probably only likely the ones who are going to have achieved those levels because they've been favored for decades and centuries, right? Or you know what I'm saying? So, and yet, because of the process, because if you're in an active RFP, council members can't even engage in the response, because then we're putting it at a disadvantage or potentially tainting the RFP pool. So, then it sits with staff. But, I'm going to bring this up, and, I welcome anybody to come and sit in a management committee meeting when we talk about procurement, because it was just such a blatant observation that this person, in my opinion, was probably being very brave to send an email to the appointed officials, which, the staff reports to, by pointing out, and it was done very professionally. But I've seen a handful of these now where they're trying to break through the bureaucracy and get to those of us who should be able to change things, but I'm not going to say but anymore. And we need to lobby harder at the state and federal level to somehow have a system in place where we can allow others who haven't perhaps reached every criteria to get there, or change the criteria, which is hard. But I want to acknowledge that this is real, and council members have gotten emails, and I think this is a good thing to keep pushing at management committee with our staff. And once the RFPs close and we can talk about stuff again, I don't want it to be lost, because I think the solutions lie in the brave people that are coming forward in a system where they want to have favor with our staff and don't want to tick people off. But you can see it. You can see it where it's really obvious. And people that have all the power and are able to complete the RFPs with ease aren't the ones that are ever going to notice or pull out these kinds of problems. So I heard you tonight, and I want to bring it back to management, and would welcome you to, our management committee meetings are open. We don't meet in person yet, but certainly I'd love to be able to share that and tie it back to some of our own experience as council members who have heard about this and know what's happening.
I would love to attend, sorry, and just if I can get notice of when those are, I would love to attend to just be a part of the conversation. There are some ways that you can work around that through furthering equal opportunity. And I'd like to bring those to the table so that people are aware of them. Real quick story, when the I-35 bridge collapsed, there was a scramble by minority contractors to be a part of rebuilding that bridge. And they reached out to big contractors around the country to come in and go through the low bid process that would allow. There were a couple of builders out of the Chicago area who had done similar type bridges and had come here and was making a commitment to draw in as many minority contractors as possible to benefit from rebuilding I-35. The powers to be moved to then implement legislation called Design Build. And at the time, there were no minority companies that were organized as design build entities. And design build entities were the only ones that were allowed to bid on rebuilding the I-35 bridge. So I just an example of how the system moves when they have build capacity to be able to coalesce to do that. And in a low bid process, it would have been fine. But because they were not organized as a design build entity, they could not get a chance to even bid on the project. So, but I would love to come to those meetings.
Thank you, everyone. I would add that I also have first-person experience with that, as in my day job, I am the owner of a consulting business that's a certified targeted group business, and learned in the last 6 months of 2 contracts that were misawarded to out-of-state white male-owned businesses, and really had to come to a decision about whether to protest those decisions, knowing that that will anger my clients. So, so I have first-person experience with that, and would be, not with the council, luckily, but with other state agencies, and would be happy to share about that as well.
Madam Chair, if I may, I put a link to the management committee meetings in the chat. So you can see all of our agendas when they're posted. And I'll mention to Chair Ferguson too about this conversation as well, especially then when we're talking about these very items, to reach back to you. But if you want to just go on that link, you can see, click on the agenda, see what we've got, popping on that thing. And if there's something on there, you're like, oh, this is very interesting. Happy to have you join us. And specifically, if you want to make, any comments or talk to the chair, I'm vice chair, Chris is chair, happy to have those conversations as well.
Thank you. I don't see it showing up in the chat yet, so go ahead and check that. And if not, we'll send it out by email afterwards. While you're doing that, I'm going to turn it over. Anita, are you open to giving an update about the committee that you've been participating on?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The committee that I participated was called through the Citizens League, and it was regarding Metro transit safety, and it was a conversation of stakeholders. And Metro Transit is doing some studies and is concerned about safety, overall safety of its riders. And so in order to get some feedback, the group that I was with, we came up with some questions of a small survey to ask the riders of the light rail, the buses, and other Metro Transits, and how they move through the Metro Pass, whether they do Metro Pass or with how they're paying for their rides and how often they use it, and basically, do they feel safe while they're on any of the Metro transportations? And so we came up with some questions of to ask the ridership. But some of the things that we just had our last meeting, we only met about 5 times. And so the Citizen League is going to start doing the survey soon this summer. And so we gave them a list of organizations that they can get in touch with. And I encourage them to get in touch with our group so that they can do a presentation with us, and then we can also give them some feedback. But this was a wide group of people throughout the metro area. And so we're looking at, what kind of ridership, specifically as we go back, people are returning back into work and transportation, the people will be using public transportation more often. And so the Metro Transit Police were also included. And in those conversations, the Police Chief Frizzell was included. So we encourage them to look at not just individual riders, but to have maybe people at the stations, the light rail stations, the bus stations, to do a quick survey with some of the riders that are waiting for the light rail to come through or the bus. Going to some organizations and agencies, going to places like county facilities, hospitals, schools, community organizations, place employers like Quest and Target, and to ask some of those questions, places that would probably give their employees Metro passes. So maybe we can get in touch with those individual employees and ask them questions. And basically it was all centered around, do you feel safe riding on public transportation? And if you don't, what are some suggestions to make you feel safe? What are some situations that have happened to you while you've been on public transportation that you didn't feel safe? For example, are you a woman who works late, or a transgender who maybe doesn't feel safe, or even males who are alone and get on a light rail, for example, and there's a group of young people, and they might, as they age, population ages, would feel more vulnerable. So there are a lot of situations where the public safety, the questions were geared towards those types of situations. And so if you'd like, I could invite Amanda to, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce her last name. It's Kajunberry with the Citizens League, and she's putting all this together. And I can ask her to, once she has it all together, to come to our future meeting and give you the fuller presentation give you some let you know what the survey questions are, and then maybe if you have any more suggestions for her, that we can put that together as a group. If that's agreeable to you all, I'd like you all to participate in before it goes out.
That would be great.
And Madam Chair, I see a tweet, the survey is live too, so
Okay.
if the committee would want, we could get the survey to people. I don't know how long, do you know how long they're having the survey out to the public? I don't know what the deadline is.
They're looking at the end of, I think, July.
Okay.
So we
All
could
right.
ask them to come to our next meeting in July and give us an update. I sent Irina the copy of the last notes that we have. And Irina, if you could send that out to everybody, I'd appreciate that so we can all have a look at it.
Sure, not a problem.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for that update.
Sure.
Brianne, I see you have your hand up. Do you have an announcement to make as well? Or comment?
I just had one comment related to the procurement discussion. I just wanted to encourage us all that we can change the outcome of procurement. It just takes bold leadership and a decision to do it, and we can do it. Um, and ask those questions if you're in those situations as a Met Council member or as a leader in your organization. You can add criteria to an RFP that says that the team shall reflect the community it serves or shall reflect the community that the work serves. Those are legal things you can do, and I think if we just insist upon it, it will happen. Instead of trying to rewrite all of the procurement rules, which obviously all do need to be rewritten, just start doing it, and we can do it. We can make bold decisions to contract with different people who we haven't typically contracted with, but it requires us to go against the systems that have been in and shirk the way we've always done things. So I just wanted to encourage people because I've seen it happen. It just requires a decision to make it happen and a bold decision to pick other teams. Those contractors are out there, they're ready, they're willing. They just need to be selected, and so I don't want any more excuses about procurement. It's just time to make change, period. And so I just wanted to send that encouraging word as someone who has been able to do that in an organization, and at least in my department, and sees a future in my organization as a whole that can do it. So it's possible, and it's not actually even that hard. We just have to make different choices about who we work with. So that's all I wanted to add.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I just want to say thank you for those encouraging words. And you have the commitment on behalf of this council, and especially those of us on management. We are pushing hard. We are pushing rope uphill. So if my words in any way came across as discouraging or not being bold, we are. And we're coming at it in every direction we can. And so I just want you to know that as much as we can push and challenge our staff and try to do everything we can, which does include, by the way, working hard to build the pipeline of minority business owners so that they are prepared and they are banked and they are ready to go with the assets they need. And we are working hard at that. And we've put our money where our mouth is. As I said earlier today, if you don't support with the resources and the funding, the goals that you have, you don't really have good goals because you're not backing them. So if anybody does want to chat with us on the management committee, we welcome it. And I know the BIPOC committee as well is all over this. And so I appreciate those words of encouragement, and I will use them as wind beneath my wings as I go forward, because we sometimes need the encouragement.
All right. Well, as we get to the end of our time together, I wanted to make space. I know we've heard from a lot of us, but some of us haven't spoken as much. So I wanted to see, for those of you that haven't had a chance to contribute as much this evening, if there's anything you'd like to bring up or any announcements you'd like to make before we wrap up for the evening. All right, I'm going to take that as no more agenda items. Thank you, everybody, so much. I really enjoyed today's conversation. It was nice to be able to dig deeply into a topic and also get to know a little bit more each other about what's on our minds and what are the things we're thinking of. So go well, stay cool. It was great to see you this evening, and hopefully I'll see many of you at our standing committee next week.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.